Hi, I'm Marty Nimco. Answers and questions on plant hybridizing. First, a foundational belief. Prioritize pleasure over commercializing. The chances of commercialization are tiny, and best case takes years. While I hybridize roses, much of what I'm going to share with you should be of value, even if you hybridize tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever. First, with the answers. Choose parents you love. That way, you'll be especially excited to see the progeny, and they're more likely to have characteristics that you value. For example, I love roses' classic flower form, the hybrid tea form. If you don't know what that is, you can Google hybrid tea rose, you'll see. I also value disease resistance, so I needn't spray. Compactness, so it's less hassle to plant and to care for. And I value dense, ideally glossy foliage, so it looks good even when it's not in bloom. So I've picked parents with as many of those characteristics as possible. For example, I use a variety called Oh So Easy Italian Ice as a female, and Rainbow's End as a male. You can Google them and you'll find them. For males, I remove the stamens, which are these little things that stick up that release the pollen, and I put them in wide-mouthed baby food jars, wide-mouthed so they're easy to get the pollen out. Labeled, of course, with the name of that male. With females, I remove the stamens to avoid self-pollinating, and a day later and a day after that, I put pollen of my chosen male on that female's stigma. I don't bother with covering crosses with a paper cone. It's too unlikely that bees will drop pollen from some other rose onto a flower whose petals have been removed. I avoid having to label each rose hip by early in the season pollinating with one male of which I have enough pollen, and then later in the season pollinating the plant with a different pollen. That way I know that hips that mature early are of the first male parent. I record the male's names on a wide plastic stake label using a pencil, 6B pencil, which writes thin and dark, but unlike Sharpies or other felt-tipped garden markers, won't fade. Starting in September, of course it's going to vary with your climate, I'm in Oakland, California, I harvest each cross when the hip has some orange or red in it, but is still part green. That avoids a too thick pericarp, that's the seed's hard outer shell, which, if it was too thick, it would reduce or delay germination. I put the hips from each cross in a separate baggie, which I label with the parent's name, for example, Oso by Rainbow. I put the baggie in the refrigerator's lowest section so it's near freezing in temperature. That's ideal for simulating winter by putting it in the refrigerator. Around year end, I shell them using a paring knife and my fingers and plant the seeds an inch apart, roughly, in a deep seedling flat that's filled with Miracle-Gro moisture-controlled potting soil, to which I've mixed roughly 10% perlite to ensure good drainage and adherence of the roots and to minimize damp-off. I put the flats, noting which cross is in each flat or a part of a flat, in a less than half-day sun location. When the flat has significant germination, I move it to a 3/4 day sun location, or even full sun. In a Word file, I note germination rates for each cross, simply good or bad. That'll help me decide what to breed with next year. I never spray with anything, pesticides, fungicides. I'm only interested in growing, let alone trying to commercialize roses that do well without spraying. Because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, which has low humidity and thus gets little black spot, to assess a cultivar's viability nationwide, I induce black spot by, in early evening, spraying the leaves with water that has been soaking black-spotted leaves. I cull ruthlessly. By Mother's Day, my approximately 400 seedlings are down to maybe 50. I've ditched any that have fewer than a dozen petals. I've ditched low-vigor plants, and of course, if there's any mildew or black spot. At that point, I transplant each survivor into a deep 4-inch or 6-inch pot. Remember, I'm dealing with compact roses, not big hybrid teas or shrubs. And I insert one of the aforementioned wide plant label stakes, on which I regularly write notes about the seedling's performance using that 6B pencil. By October, I have culled down to the best 1 or 3 varieties. I make cuttings of those for further testing here, or if I'm really excited about one, I will ask a few national rose nurseries if they'd like me to send them cuttings for testing. In said Word file, I note which crosses did well enough, both in germination and seedling quality, to justify making more crosses of it next year. Now, dear viewer, I fear that all this leaves too much unanswered. If you have questions, feel free to email me at mnemco@gmail.com. That's mnemko@gmail.com. Now, my questions. My germination rate averages just 15%, and I've heard that other rose hybridizers can get 20 or 30%, so I have questions. Before planting, should I reduce damp-off and other fungal risk by dunking the seeds in a weak Clorox solution? If so, what dilution and for how long? At what point in the growing season should I cut back on the feeding and watering? My current belief is to keep them well watered throughout the season, but stop feeding in August, which is a month before the first hips will be ready for harvesting. Should I be stratifying the seeds in the hip or shell them and then stratify them in moist paper towels? If the latter, should I dunk the wrapped seeds in the aforementioned Clorox solution? I find rose hybridizing a restful hobby. Whether you're hybridizing roses, tomatoes, pickles, whatever, I hope that these ideas, even my questions, will help your hybridizing yield more results and pleasure with less stress. In any event, that's answers and questions on plant hybridizing. As usual, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel, and certainly would welcome you taking a look at any of my 34 books. Perhaps the most relevant to this is How to Do Life, but all 34 are on Amazon. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.